Welcome to the Emerald City Sportscast.
Wilson, as he throws deep downfield. It's going to be caught by Metcalf for the touchdown.
Hosted by longtime Northwest sports journalist Dan Viennes.
Here's the drive deep to left. He has done it again. Wow. Kyle Lewis, 3 games, 3 home runs. Mariners have a 5-2 lead.
Brought to you by Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio. World-class audio recording right in the heart of the Woodinville Winery District.
Wide receivers to either side. Russell takes the snap, drops back. He's going to throw down the middle. He's got a man. The ball is caught.
Game over, baby.
Touchdown. The game is over. The Seahawks are going back to the Super Bowl.
And now, broadcasting live from the Dan Cave Studios, here's your host, Dan Viennes.
All right, everybody, welcome in. I am Dan Viennes, your host of the Emerald City Sportscast. Fully caffeinated, half vaccinated. Halfway there. The allergies are getting to me a little bit, though. Today, we'll just apologize for that ahead of time. Got a lot to talk about. Our friend Erik Briggs is joining us on the show today. We're going to talk Seahawks. Lots of another flurry of moves for them yesterday. They've been unusually active in free agency. We'll get to that in a minute. We're also going to talk some Mariners as we are just now 8 days away from the beginning of their regular season. Let's get to the headlines, shall we?
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
And now, here's today's headlines, brought to you by FreeBets, the newest online sports betting comparison site. Check them out at freebets.us.
As I said, the Seahawks unusually busy in this year's free agency market, addressing their pass rush yesterday in a significant way. First, they brought back edge Benson Mayowa, and then just minutes after that news broke, further news broke that they were signing Jarran Hyder as well, another defensive end, although he can also reduce down and play some defensive tackle. Also, Mayowa was 6 sacks for the Hawks last year, while Hyder led the 49ers with 8.5 after injuries forced him into a bigger role. Both deals include void years, something the Seahawks are using this year to help manage their salary cap. First time they've ever done that. Now they've done it 4 times so far. Is more on the way? Is that it for the Hawks' pass rush plans, or is a Carlos Dunlap reunion still possible? I'll have much more on these 2 moves with Erik Briggs coming up in today's show. Meanwhile, the Mariners continue to trim their roster as they move closer to opening day. The most notable cut this week, reliever Gerson Batista. Batista, you'll recall, one of the players Seattle got from the Mets in exchange for Carlos Diaz and Robinson Cano in 2018, along with Justin Dunn and Jared Kelenic. Batista threw hard, but battled injuries and command along the way and was particularly bad this spring, walking 6 without recording a strikeout in 5 1/3 innings. The M's opened their season April 1st at home against the San Francisco Giants. Kind of a weird opening game for them. We're going to talk Mariners and Seahawks and roster construction for both teams, coming up with special guest Erik Briggs after this break. You're listening to the Emerald City Sportscast. Looking for a place of inspiration to record your next musical or vocal project? Why not do it in the middle of wine country? Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio is a 4-room boutique recording studio in the heart of Woodinville Tourist District on Hollywood Hill. Within walking distance of over 100 different wine, beer, and spirit tasting rooms, this peaceful setting offers a respite from the rat race of everything around it. The studio features 14-foot ceilings throughout and a large main tracking room, along with separate isolation rooms for drum tracking and vocals. Featuring a talented crew of freelance engineers and an impressive array of industry-leading equipment, my friends at Hollywood and Vine Studios can assist with your audio tracking, mixing, and mastering pursuits. To find out more or to book a session, email Kevin at hollywood-vines.com, call 206-235-8125, or visit hollywood-vines.com.
You're listening to the Emerald City Sportscast, presented by Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio. And now, here's Dan.
Joining me on the hotline today, Erik Briggs. How you doing, Erik?
I'm great. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. It's always fun when the Seahawks are making moves, right?
Oh, so exciting.
We actually, yesterday I jumped on with Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers on the Seahawks Playbook podcast. A great podcast. Should be hitting later today if you all want to look for that. And literally as they were starting to record what ended up being almost a 2-hour show, I thought, well, I should probably check Twitter one last time and just see if anything happens. It just felt like something might happen. And the Mayowa news broke right before we hit record, so we were able to address that. And then about halfway into the show, the Carey Hyder news broke, so we were able to get into that. But you and I haven't had a chance to talk about it much other than a couple of texts last night. Give me first your initial impressions on, first real quick, the dollars. So, again, as I mentioned at the top, John Schneider for the first time ever and Matt Thomas, their cap guy, using the void year. Basically, let's call it what it is. It's a loophole in the salary cap rules that allow you to spread out the cap hit so that you can get a lower year one cap hit, which the Seahawks certainly need to do. As we talk right now, over the cap shows them over the cap, $2.7 million over, but that does not include the Gerald Everett signing, which is $6 million guaranteed plus another $1 million in incentives, and it doesn't include Mayowa and Hyder. So clearly something's happened behind the scenes. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Mayowa, if you forget the void years, it's essentially a 2-year deal for $8.5 million. Hyder, a 2-year deal for $6.5 million. There's a $10 million void year that's automatic, and so it was originally reported as a 3-year, $16.5 million deal. But it's 2 years at $3.25 million each year. Couple of value signings, certainly, for a couple of guys that have been role players in the past. How do you feel about these moves?
I mean, like I texted you last night, I kind of feel like without us getting Dunlap or someone of that, talent level, that I feel a little bit like this was the Mayo Urban, although I do concede. I think Hyder's a much better player than Urban. Younger, been a lot healthier, and actually plays on the line. Urban obviously was more of an outside linebacker that they could put in as a situational pass rusher. I mean, when you talk dollars, these are two great signings. I mean, they're very low risk, not a lot of money spent, and certainly doesn't prohibit the Hawks from going after a Dunlap or Clowney or any other names that you're hearing. So I like it. I like it overall. If this is it, though, for the D-line, I will be a little bit disappointed we didn't get another premier pass rusher, because we saw how that changed our team halfway through last season to get that just natural ability, tons of talent, all the necessary moves to make offensive linemen scared of them. We still miss that. So we definitely need that to finish off this D-line.
Yeah, and that's really the unknown. This is one of those moves that I'm reserving, or series of moves that I'm reserving judgment until we see the big picture. Sometimes you just don't know, and how the Seahawks think. They have been guilty in the past of making moves like this and having a little too much confidence that this guy or that guy was the missing piece, and we've seen that before. If this is it, you can make an argument that they're close to where they ended last year, where they were the second half of the season. They were one of the top pass rush win rate teams in the league. That essentially they bring back the entire group intact except for like some third-level role players, guys like Brandon Jackson, with Hyder instead of Dunlap. Well, that's not quite as good, but you can still make an argument that with Darrell Taylor being healthy, that it's still a pretty interesting front that can get some things done, a lot of different looks, a lot of versatility there. But we just don't know about Taylor yet. The team's confident in him, and it would be a very Pete Carroll-esque move for them to move forward counting on him too much. But the more I look at and I hope that's not the case here. Yesterday I thought, okay, this clearly, my first reaction was sort of like you. This must mean that Dunlap is in the wind. But when you look at the structure of the money, and the more I look at Hyder, because I wasn't that familiar with him, and his versatility inside and outside, and how he plays the base end position more so than Leo at his size, and the fact that Carlos Dunlap is yet to take a visit anywhere else. I mean, even guys like Ryan Kerrigan is on the visit train now. He's going to Cincinnati. He's going Washington wants him back. Those kind of second, third, fourth level veteran, older, rotational edges are now getting visits. Melvin Ingram is visiting multiple teams. We haven't heard a thing from Carlos Dunlap yet, which makes me think the plan is still to bring him back, and Hyder being that guy that can move around, and Mayowa being a rotational edge. Pete Carroll said on the record last year Mayowa is better when he plays limited snaps. I still have a hunch that Dunlap's coming back. The team just needs to make another move salary-wise and able to free that up and make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to make the perfect sense here. And, it depends on, is a move Wagner, is a move Wilson. Those are the two obvious guys as far as salary and where we can free up the dollars. And I feel good that I think Dunlap is, still coming back to the Hawks. This is much different than what we went through with Clowney last year.
Yeah.
Where he definitely went shopping. I remember at one point wasn't he asking for like $20 million.
He thought he was going to get that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think he ended up $13 million with the Titans. And I think that also the players realize what the market is. I mean, you look around the league, and outside of the Patriots, who had a ton of cap space and decided to use it, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of these deals where people were like, oh my God. I mean, if someone was surprised that Dak Prescott got paid, I would question whether or not you really, watch football. We all knew Dak would get paid. That wasn't a surprise.
Yeah.
And we all knew he'd get paid, that, $40 million type of deal, $35, $40 million a year. But everyone else, I mean, there hasn't been too much. I mean, even if you look at the Lindsley contracts and the Thuney contracts, for an interior lineman that gets up there, but it wasn't something that was like, oh, we reset the market and here's the new cost for, interior offensive linemen. So, I guess I have a good feeling Dunlap's coming back. I don't see why they wouldn't. I know he wants to be in Seattle. I know we want him back. And that would kind of be the final move for us as far as D-line. There might be some more depth things, especially at D-tackle. But outside of that, I mean, you're kind of looking at the group you're going to have is here plus a Dunlap.
Well, now I'll take it one step further, though, because I've seen some speculation, and it was one of the things I thought of initially. Is when you sign Hyder, whether you bring Dunlap back or not, one of the first questions is, well, what does this mean for L.J. Collier, who played well in his first season of really being healthy and getting to be a full-time starter at that 5 technique spot? I wonder, there aren't many ways the Seahawks can go outside of what you mentioned. They can restructure, they can convert some salary to bonus for Wilson or Wagner. They could extend Tyler Lockett. They could extend Dwayne Brown if they felt good enough about his knee moving forward. But the one thing I keep hearing that up until yesterday I did not like the idea of is trading Jarran Reed. Now, you'd like to keep Jarran Reed on the roster. Had a good year last year, and he's shown that as long as you have strong edge play, he can be a really effective interior rusher. Making $9.5 million this year, that's all salary, so that would be a total cap savings if you did move him with no dead cap. The Seahawks don't have many other avenues they can look to try to recoup some draft capital this year. I wonder, by adding Hyder as a guy that can play that 5 technique and play it well, along with Alton Robinson can play there, Rasheem Green can play there, if it opens up the door to move L.J. Collier full-time to 3 technique, where he was a beast in camp last year and early in the season, and really that may be his more natural spot, allowing the team to move on from Jarran Reed and clear some cap space that way. I just wonder if that's something that's in the works.
I mean, that's definitely one of the possibilities that you and I have talked about, that they could move on from Reed, especially with the fact that Collier did show us something, as you said, last year. Like, they showed in camp that he could break down to the 3 technique, and he was a beast. I mean, he was physical. He's got the power. Obviously he's got the quickness that a lot of D tackles, 3 techniques aren't showing, because he did come from the edge in college, and we have played him out on the edge in the pros up to this point. I don't know, though, about making that sort of move. I would be more interested in, Wagner being moved on, or Wagner's salary being restructured, just because we've seen when you have that front four and you have multiple pieces to rotate in there, these guys are staying fresh. They're really getting after the quarterback. They're really disruptive in the run game. You slide Jordan Brooks over to Wagner's spot, and I think that's a better defense. And I think it'd be hard for someone to tell me it wouldn't be a better defense.
Yeah.
Because we have been exposed for the last 3-4 years, especially with the Abrils and the Bennetts when we got past that era of the Seahawks D-line, where there was a lot of versatility there. There was a lot of rotational guys there, guys that could move inside, guys that could move outside, depending on the situation. We were a much better effective defense, and we got to quarterbacks quicker, and we stuffed the run better. So I would be more interested in keeping Jarran Reed at this point than I would be Bobby Wagner. Like if I was, obviously, we have all the cap implications, but if you said, hey, all things being equal, I would move on from Wagner before I'd move on from Jarran Reed.
Yeah, I think regardless of whatever the Seahawks do over the next couple weeks in free agency, this team bears watching right up until and on draft day, because I think I don't necessarily know if they're going to be working the phones, shopping some of these guys around the league, but I certainly think if a team calls about Bobby Wagner, they would listen, and we'll know more if there's a move regarding KJ Wright, because there's been talk, just like there has been with Dunlap, that Wright really wanted market value this year, didn't want to take a hometown discount. The market's just not there for him. He hasn't visited.
Not at all.
He hasn't visited at all. There's been not a whisper about other teams' interest in KJ Wright, and the linebacker market as a whole has just been dead, other than Jared Davis going to the Jets, and even that for a former recent first-round draft pick was a bargain market deal.
Oh, by far.
If the team, even at a really cheap price, brings back KJ Wright, then you have to wonder if another move may be next, because then now you'd be looking at going into season 2, where your first-round draft pick, really talented young inside linebacker that has the versatility to play both, but his two best positions then, we all think, for Jordan Brooks are middle linebacker or strong side linebacker. And if you bring back KJ Wright, well, now you're taking your first-round pick and playing him on the weak side, which is kind of his weakest position, in lieu of those other two guys. So there may be other dominoes. There may be some drama left in the tank before draft day with this team, not including, this is the first week we haven't talked about the quarterback. So it feels like they're working extremely hard to try and keep pace in the NFC West and win it again and put themselves in a position to do that with this quarterback and with this new offensive coordinator, but that we still may not have seen all the bullets they have left in the chamber.
Yeah, talk about being very Seahawksy right now. The funny thing is we could also see them do absolutely nothing else.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't shock us, right?
No.
That just wouldn't shock us. Or we could see some really big fireworks go off up to draft day and then even post-draft day. I mean, you got to remember, two of the bigger trades he pulled off for, Clowney and for Graham, those were post-draft day trades that materialized for John Schneider.
Yeah,
so,
and Adams.
And Adams, actually, yeah. And so now, I really feel like, especially in the 4-3 defense that we run, that's just who we are, we're 4-3 guys, that the linebackers are becoming more and more like running backs. You have one feature guy, Bobby Wagner or Jordan Brooks, and then you have, these other nice pieces that you're kind of always reloading around them, on your strong side and weak side. It's the defensive line that's become more important there, because you have this really strong defensive line, especially on running plays that are going to, soak up some of those blocks, not let guys get to the second level. And now all of a sudden you're talking about a tackling drill for your linebackers. Well, that doesn't take a whole lot of talent to be a really solid tackler, especially when you're talking about guys going to the NFL. Now, maybe you could make the argument in the 3-4 defenses that you're going after some more big-time guys, the Bud Duprees and, the TJ Watts of the world, people like that. And I agree with that, but that's not who we are. We're a 4-3 defense. There is no reason for us to change from that. Quite frankly, we don't have the personnel to run a 3-4. That'd be a total overhaul, and it'd be Carroll switching his defensive philosophy. So, I just feel like the linebackers in 4-3s, they become a lot like the running back position has over the last, decade in the NFL where, yeah, hey, maybe you've got one or two guys out there, Saquon Barkley's type of guys. But other than that, you have a bunch of running back by committees. You don't have these bell cows. They're getting 200 carries a season.
Well, let's talk about running backs for a minute, because since you and I have last talked, the Seahawks brought back Chris Carson. I didn't think this was something that was going to happen this offseason. I thought he would get a better offer, something that they couldn't really justify matching, similar to what happened with Shaquille Griffin. How do you feel about the return of Chris Carson? Are you surprised by that?
I'm not surprised. The Seahawks have shown in the past that they love their guys and they love bringing their guys back. They love extending their guys. They're very targeted when they bring someone in from the outside. I was just like everyone else. I was very, giddy about the Leonard Fournette potential coming to Seattle. That never actually happened.
Yeah, he's still mulling those offers over, apparently.
Yeah, right. But what I don't like about Carson's been his durability. What I don't like about Carson is he's not the same running back we saw when he first came in the league. Is this a bad move by the Hawks? No, not at all. Obviously they felt comfortable bringing him back. Obviously they felt comfortable bringing back Alex Collins instead of Carlos Hyde.
Yeah.
So I guess the running back room's kind of where it's at. I mean, there might be another guy coming to fill out the room. There might be one more player, whether that's draft or unrestricted free agent, undrafted unrestricted free agent.
Oh, they better not. They better not spend one of their 3 picks on a running back this year.
Yeah, well, I thought the same thing, and then they took Rashard Penny in the first round 4 years ago. But hey, I still haven't let that go, apparently.
Yeah.
But we'll see what this running back room looks like. I mean, is this finally the year that Rashard Penny is healthy for a full season? I'm starting to feel like the kid we drafted out of Notre Dame. That
right.
All the talent in the world, we were so excited about him catching the ball out of the backfield and everything, never got healthy.
Yeah.
Alex Collins, I've always liked Alex Collins. I hated when we let him go the first time, so I'm real happy that he's back. And I like the way that he runs. He's very much a north-south, one-cut running back, which used to be Chris Carson. But I think any Seahawks fan, especially this last season that watched it, I think that guy spent more time going east-west than he did north-south, and it got very frustrating that he was trying to juke the whole playground. And it's like, dude, one cut, you'll get us our 3-4 yards. Sometimes you spring it for more, and let's go. Let's get to the next down and let's play some football. But there was just too many times I saw Carson dancing behind that line and not making a decision just to put his foot in the ground and cut up field and try to make something happen. So maybe that's all different. We're going back to the wide zone blocking system allegedly. Now that Waldron is here,
yeah,
and that's the system they run. So maybe that's different with Carson, and maybe there's something Waldron has saw previously with Carson that makes him feel comfortable with him. Because I'm going to guess that part of these moves had to have been made. If you made the big splash of going and getting Shane Waldron and all the stock they put in him, and I think Gerald Everett signing is a perfect example that I think he probably has some input right now. Hey, what personnel do you need to make your offense work? Because we're committing to this new offense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, Chris Carson kind of lost me last year in the playoff game when he, for those who remember the 4th and 1 that the Seahawks went for and handed it to Carlos Hyde, and we all wondered why it was Hyde, especially because Carson on the 2 plays prior to that had some nice gains. Well, if you watch the replay closely enough, you can catch a shot of Carson motioning to the sideline. He was kind of tagging himself out like he needed a blow. And
yeah.
And, maybe that foot was never 100% healthy. Maybe he was battling through that. But that just, in that moment, man, it's, unless you got a bone sticking out, you should want that ball. And so that got me a little bit. At the money they brought him back, though, given the Shane Waldron hire, I am excited. My initial thought, as much as I thought we had lost him or would lose him, and I was okay with that, I thought, okay, let's go. I want to see him in this offense because one thing Shane Waldron has done a little bit with the Rams that we never saw Brian Schottenheimer try to do with Carson and Penny is both of them in the backfield at the same time. And I think that could be a really interesting look and something that really throws a kind of a wrench in the plans of the defense. And if they can figure out a way to use those two together, because they're very different backs, and keep them both fresh, and along with Alex Collins, and then I think it's going to be really hard personally for Travis Homer to make this team, because I think DJ Dallas is a more physical runner. It could be a really dynamic backfield, all things considered. So just another surprise from the Seahawks this year. But I'll tell you one thing that we're seeing again this year more than we have in past years, even because this is the first time they've had this many free agents in a while that have tested the market, is guys like playing here. And they get these guys back. And I think that still says something about the program. And I think we might see some other guys coming back too. I think a guy like Cedric Ogbuehi could come back as a swing tackle, as well as Carlos Dunlap. So, for all the negativity this offseason, I think that's a positive we can take away.
Well, and I think that's one thing that we can speak to, and is how many times have we seen, leading up, and you got all the national guys, the Cardinals are going to be the top of the division, so-and-so, so-and-so, and, gosh darn it, aren't the Seahawks just always there? No one ever really gives us our due, and they call it lucky wins or lucky breaks or whatever, but guess what? That's part of the game. And after a while, you can't call it luck. At some point, you have to look at the system, you have to look at the process and say, it's working. And even when we didn't go out and get the big splashy free agents in years past, there we are in the playoffs. Now, that's the next evolution here is, hey, can we finally get to the playoffs and now make some noise? I mean, three of the last 4 trips are one and done. I mean, that's not an impressive record, and I know that's something that's probably eaten at Pete Carroll and the rest of his coaching staff. And I think that might be one of the biggest pushes they had for Shane Waldron. I think that we can all talk about how Russell Wilson, the situation with that, and they had to bring in this dynamic play caller. And I know that played something into it. But I wouldn't be surprised if you could get Pete Carroll one-on-one, and just ask him that he would say a bigger part was we need to be better in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And part of being better in the playoffs is having dynamic play calling and having a system that puts a lot of stress on an opposing defense. And here we go. Because if you look at the success they've had in the playoffs with the Rams, with a far inferior quarterback in Jared Goff, man, you got to put it to them. The last 3-4 years compared to us in the playoffs, they're a much scarier team.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you have to take away from what we've seen so far this offseason in free agency from the Seahawks is last year in the offseason, it kind of had a feeling of this team knows that they have a shot to win the division every year. They know they're in a position to do that. It was a very conservative offseason. Bringing Greg Olsen in on a 1-year deal was really kind of their big splash move until right before the season, and they make the deal for Jamal Adams. But as far as free agency goes, they were acting like a team that thought, okay, we're good. We're okay. Yeah. They're acting like a team this year that knows that they need to bust their butt to keep up with what's going on in Los Angeles and what's going on in San Francisco and how much better that defense is going to be this year, and still not sure about the quarterback situation there, but and how aggressive Arizona is in trying to improve that young team. They're acting like a team that needs to make up some ground, and I think that can only be taken as a positive if you're a fan.
It has to be, because I think the one position you could – well, there's two, actually. You brought up one, tight end. The other one would be the interior offensive line. Mm-hmm. In the years past, even going all the way back to Luke Jokel when we brought him in, we kept bringing in these older offensive linemen with health issues that, no one was really sold on. And I know Gabe Jackson's 32, but, he's, played 99 out of the last 100 games. We all know about his pass pro and how, just elite level his pass pro is. He's a really good run blocker as well. He's not totally, garbage there. He, to me, was a big difference. In years past, we would have gone after one of these offensive linemen who've been cut, who, he's only played half the games over the last 3 years because of these injuries. They didn't do that this year. I know Gabe Jackson's 32, but he's been very durable, and he's been very elite in his level of play. Same thing with going out and getting Gerald Everett. Obviously a young guy coming off a rookie contract. I think he's 26, turns 27 during the season, compared to, when we would go get Greg Olsen. When we would just rotate back through Hollister and Luke Wilson and things of that. Like, there's no doubt Gerald Everett is a huge improvement for our tight end room. And he fits in very nicely with Dissly and Parkinson, because these guys all share this very athletic build. Dissly's obviously a very good inline blocker. Gerald Everett did not start off as a good inline blocker. Over the last 2 years, became a very good inline blocker. So he's more of a complete tight end.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be interested to see how they have those three guys. I mean, obviously they're not going to be on the field at the same time, but whether it's Dissly Parkinson or Dissly Everett or Everett Parkinson, getting that combination of those guys on the field and using those two tight end sets that are very popular with the Rams offense, and I like a lot, I think that's also going to be very exciting to see.
Yeah. Given what they've done on the offensive line, bringing in Jackson, which to me it changed the entire offseason when they did that. And then they bring Ethan Posick back again, but at basically a $1.5 million deal. And then in the press release the team puts out about his signing, they don't talk about him as a center. They talk about his versatility. So you feel like their starting center might not still be on the roster. Is that position in particular what you're targeting with that first pick in the draft?
I think you have to. Now, I think there is some flexibility there, because you're not talking about it leading up to this draft right now. The interior offensive lineman draft class, yes, has top-end talent. It's also got a lot of great depth talent, though.
Yeah.
They're talking about some of these guys possibly even going into the third round that can be day one starters because of how quality they are. Whether you're talking about the Creed Humphreys or the Cleveland. So I'm not necessarily set on it had to be a center, because, they showed that they're willing to push Lewis inside to play center. So that's a possibility.
Yeah.
You've got, obviously bringing in, Gabe Jackson. He's been playing right guard. So we might already be talking about Lewis is on the move to left guard. But if you find a really great left guard in the draft, Lewis might be sliding over to center. And it might be Posick and Lewis, battling it out, which obviously I think Lewis has a huge, head and shoulders is better than Posick. But I do think that Posick is probably now your swing guy for guard and center.
Yeah.
With the possibility that if he takes another step forward as a center, he could possibly still win the job. I don't think that's out of the question.
Sure.
But with the way they're constructing it, it doesn't seem to me that they're done. I don't think that they're looking at Posick as the starting center. There's going to be some form of competition that he's going to face to prove that he's the best man for the job. And that's back to Seahawks football. When Carroll showed up, competition. And they've done a good job in the early years of Seahawks, and it looks like the last 2 years they're going back to doing that. And that should be exciting for all the Seahawks fans out there, that they're getting back to, we don't care you're undrafted, we don't care you're drafted, we don't care you're a free agent, we don't care that we traded for you. Either you step up and you make it happen, or we're going to go to the next guy. Yeah. We're going to go to the better player.
Let me ask you this. If the season started today, outside of, just assume all the starters would be healthy, because clearly there's a need for a swing tackle, a guy that can back up Brown and presumably Shell, and I'm sure they'll address that. If the season started today, is the offense better than it was last year?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think that with the moves you made on the offensive line, with the moves you made in the tight end room, with the running backs that we brought back, and then, of course, with the new system coming in, I don't see how this is not a better offense. And I think that they've added players specifically that tell us they bought into Waldron's system. He wasn't simply a hire, and we've seen this in the past. And it's not just the Seahawks. It's not just football. We've seen hires like this in the past across sports. Yeah, we say all this in public. We want to be different. We want to do this. We want to do that. There you go. You got the job. But now here's 99 rules to prevent you from actually going forward and making it happen. I don't see that. I think with the personnel decisions, they're showing that they're buying in. I think with the fact that getting the Gerald Everetts of the world in here, with trading for Gabe Jackson, I think that they're showing a real commitment to Waldron and the new system. I would not be surprised, honestly, with the Hawks and the way they move, might not be a free agent center coming our way as well. That's still a possibility in the back of my head right now that they might say, you know what? There's a couple of really quality veteran centers out there that fit what we're doing, and they might go sign one of these guys.
Yeah, I'm still surprised that Austin Blythe is still out there in the market. I know he has short arms, and that's something the Seahawks typically don't like, but the fact that he played in that Rams system, played well last year as a center, and that the market hasn't come to him at all. Again, a guy that hasn't taken any visits anywhere. I know the Rams have wanted to bring him back, but there's guys like that out there. They do like Kyle Fuller, who they extended as an exclusive rights free agent. Some think that he could beat out Posick this year straight up and be the better guy at center as well. And then you talked about the possibility of Lewis moving over. So I agree with you. I think at the end of last season, as a fan, you look at that team and you go, okay, what cost us that playoff game and what held us back from going deeper in the playoffs? It was the offense. And I do think you have to be really excited about where that offense is today in March compared to where they ended the season with still some work left to be done. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball, again, still work left to be done. You go from Shaquille Griffin to Akello Witherspoon. Everything else basically comes back intact. You lose Dunlap, but you get Hyder. Dunlap still may be coming back. KJ Wright may still be coming back. There was a huge transition period for that defense in the first half last season. You get the feeling that squad is going to hit the ground running, and those adjustments that Ken Norton made and how he calls a game and how he bluffs blitzes and mixes things up a little bit more, if that carries over, it's, again, we're seeing the national press say that the Seahawks have taken a step back, but I'm not so sure.
Yeah, and remember, I forget when I read this, might have been about 6 years ago, but, Carroll very much talked about those first 5 or 6 games to him aren't all that important. Like, he's laying the foundation for the rest of the season, and they're really experimenting in some ways with what they can and can't do in those first 5 or 6 games. The thing that was different last year is we happened to run off those wins all in a row. So that gave a lot of us a higher expectation of what the season was going to look like. And, of course, in the middle of the season we ran into our troubles.
Yeah.
So if this team comes out 3-2 this season or 3-3, and it looks like they're still figuring some stuff out, I wouldn't even take that as a step back, more as that's part of Carroll's process in a lot of ways. He really worries about his division games, winning his division games, and then he really worries about the middle part and the final third of the season. So, lessons learned, and we hope they don't have a slow start. Obviously, it's nicer to have the quick start. But don't be surprised if we don't see what some people might even term as regression on the defensive side of the ball next year in the first 5 or 6 games, not because they've truly regressed, but because of the process that Carroll and his staff uses and how they break down the season.
Yeah. Well, it'll be fun to watch the next couple of months how you just know that John Schneider's going to do something to get back into this draft in a major way, probably something to surprise us, and that there are more moves coming. So we were able to make it through an entire 40-minute segment of Seahawks talk without talking about trading Russell Wilson. I'm proud of us.
Very proud.
You want to talk some baseball?
I love baseball.
All right, we're going to wrap up with some Mariners talk. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back with Erik Briggs on the Emerald City Sportscast. Online gamers, have you checked out PSX Extreme? If not, you're missing out. PSX Extreme is a cutting-edge gaming website providing you with everything you need to know about the latest and greatest games. You'll find up-to-the-minute news about the gaming industry, as well as in-depth reviews of all the coolest games. The writing staff at PSX Extreme will also keep you informed on all the rumors about new games in development and impending releases. So if you can put down the controller just for a second, do yourself a favor and check out psxextreme.com.
You're listening to the Emerald City Sportscast, presented by Hollywood and Vines Recording Studio.
And now, here's Dan.
All right, you guys. Back here with Erik Briggs on today's episode. We got some Seahawks talk out of the way, but Man, opening day is only 8 days away if you're listening to this on Wednesday, the 24th. The Mariners open April 1st at home at T-Mobile Park against the San Francisco Giants, a rare interleague opening series. Let's talk some baseball. Erik, you're down there. You're in the valley, the desert down there near where the Mariners train. First, let's get your overall impressions of from what you've seen, how you think the team has looked so far this spring heading into the season.
I'm excited. Our pitching's looked very good. Getting the big Maple back is just huge, and I think it's going to change the entire mentality of that.
Boy, he looked good the other day.
Staff. So I'm really excited. I think our pitching is going to be tough this year, much tougher than in years past. Although we're still going to give the young guys their shots, which, you and I, we bought into the rebuild. So you can't have a rebuild without the kids getting some playing time. They got to get in there. Obviously last year Sheffield made a step forward. All the reports coming out of the Mariners, especially down here, talking to, a lot of the people here, because we do get a chance to see a lot of their coaching staff in and out of the bar, is done taking a step forward. Can he do what Sheffield did last year? And so they're really high on where they think they are as a staff, and I agree with them. Obviously, we know we have a ton of exciting young bats. We now need to see the young bats, though, produce. Yeah. And, are we going to get Kyle Lewis that started the season last year? Or we get the Kyle Lewis that kind of, hit that slump in the, back half of the season. So it'll be exciting to see if, Kyle Lewis can maintain his level of play. And then obviously, all the other questions that are coming right now. Kelnick, when do you see him? When do you not see him? Some of the young arms, do you see Logan Gilbert and all these other guys at some point? Is this going to be one of those seasons where they're doing the up-down thing with them, doing spot starts, etc.?
Yeah.
And then what guys are they converting to the pen? There's obviously a lot of starting pitching talent that we have, but anyone that follows baseball, some of those guys are going to be converted to a pen role at some point. If they're just not going to make it as a starter because they can't get through that rotation the second and third time without getting roughed up, then guess what? They're gonna be heading to the pen. So it'll be interesting to see some of those guys and where they end up. And then you got the other questions, Crawford and Shed Long and some other guys, France, Torrens, how are they going to shape up with their bats? But I think exciting. I mean, this is going to be a season where, we're pushing for 500. I fully expect us to push for that. Do I think competing for a playoff spot's a little out of their reach? I do. I think they're a little young still for that. I think there's too many holes in the lineup to really expect these guys to compete for a playoff run. But with what we've been through and with the process they're going through, us getting to 500 this year would be amazing. I mean, that would be such a boost to their confidence that the rebuild is going the way it's supposed to, and that we've got a lot of exciting years in our future. We hit 500 this year.
Yeah, that would certainly be something. And I think anything close to 500, I think, would be enough to energize the fan base and really send the message that, hey, this thing's working, because even still now there's a large portion of the fan base that's skeptical because even with the flood of positive news surrounding our system and how highly it's ranked and our prospects and there's some cynicism out there. That. There's fans that roll their eyes and say, we've heard it before, this guy, that guy, and Montero and Smoke and Ackley and blah, blah, blah. But I, and some of this stuff we won't know until the minor league season starts, and we don't know exactly when that's going to happen. And so we may get, I envision a season that's going to look very, very different from the first half to the second. I feel like in the first half of the season, we're going to get a lot of evaluation and a lot of experimenting and a lot of mixing and matching with bullpen roles and lineups and young guys coming up and down. We'll see the debut of Kelnick at some point in the first half. And then the second half, they'll kind of try to dial things in and try to win games and see how far they can take it. You've touched on a lot of stuff there. I want to break some of this stuff down. Now, you mentioned Justin Dunn, and they haven't announced yet who has won that sixth starter role. But if you look at it in a vacuum, both their ERAs done at 1.43, Nick Margavicius at 1.41, but Dunn 6 walks to 8 strikeouts, Margavicius just 1 walk to 10 strikeouts. But you sound pretty confident that Dunn's going to grab that 6th spot.
Well, kind of looping back to what you just said, though, I think that's going to be part of the experimentation in the first half of the season. Does Dunn get, his control, and does he challenge the batters in the strike zone, or are we still going to see this really high walk rate?
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be part of their evaluation period for the first half of the season. Now, Margavicius, I'm really high on as well, and I really like him. But now you start running into some of the things that we talk about with how does your lineup look? How many lefties, how many righties do you have?
Yeah, that'd be 5 lefties.
Yeah. So, that is something that you have to at least consider as part of what they're going to do moving forward. And then that's also where you start talking about trade pieces.
Yeah.
Maybe Dunn's a trade piece. Maybe Margavicius is a trade piece, because I don't think this front office is worried about if we're competing or not to make a move at the deadline. They might be making a move for the future and jump on somebody, and you can use some of this young pitching to help bring that piece in that's building for the 22 season and beyond.
Yeah.
I don't see us moving Paxton. It was different last year with Walker. There was so many injuries with Walker. He had never put together a big league season like Paxton has on multiple years. I see Paxton sticking around, and I think they view Paxton as part of their future, albeit the short-term future because of his age. But I see him being an important piece for us the next 2-3 years, especially helping out these young guys and developing these young starting pitchers and, helping them become better pro ball players.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I don't necessarily think Dunn locks down the 6th spot, but I think that he probably has the leg up right now from what I hear and from what I've seen. But I also don't see him having this really long leash where he can just go out there and, run a 1-to-1 walk to strikeout ratio.
Yeah, and I think that just from a roster standpoint, it makes a lot more sense having Margavicius in the bullpen, especially after the injury to Roenis Elias, who was having a good spring. Leaves him only one lefty in the pen in Mishevitz, and you add Margavicius to that, and not only are those 2 great names, but it's a left-hander, and I'm not saying he's Josh Hader, but who kind of reminds me of when Josh Hader first came on the scene for the Brewers, where he's a guy that can go multiple innings, be really dynamic, get out left-handers and right-handers. And if you have a starter who's struggling, or you're trying to limit innings, or you just need him to get through the lineup one full time and pitch a couple innings to you, if your bullpen's been spent the last couple of days, I feel like his value, more so than Dunn beating him out per se, I just feel like his value in the bullpen is much higher, at least for now. I want to get into something else you touched on when we talk about the future. And when you talk about young guys, and at some point in these rebuilds, you have to have some key veterans that stick around. You talked about Paxton potentially being that guy in the rotation. I agree with you, by the way. I think that it's a 1-year deal, but I think their hope is that if he's healthy, he clearly likes it here, that he'll be amenable to a 2 or 3 year extension and keep him around. As far as the lineup goes, the 2 veterans, you could make a case for Tom Murphy, but the 2 veterans who could be that guy are Kyle Seager and Mitch Haniger. Haniger coming off 2 years lost to injury, looking good this spring, hitting 290, couple of bombs. He's been healthy, looks great. Kyle Seager hitting 387 this spring, really looks to have unlocked something a couple of years ago after struggling in 2018. He's in the last year of his deal. Haniger is in his 3rd arbitration year going into 2022, so he'd have 1 year left to control. But if he has a good year, he'd be due for a big raise. Seager, last year of his deal, but a team option for $15 million in 2022. Everyone, including Kevin Mather, of course, essentially assuming this is Kyle Seager's last year with the organization. But if you were in charge, wouldn't you at least consider keeping him on that option at $15 million for 2022? Do you think these two guys stick around?
I think that Hyder has the better chance of sticking around. I really do. Age plays into that. Also, position plays into it a little bit. Because I would be more hesitant running out an outfield group that we've all, we know what the hope has always been from Dipoto is just this uber athletic outfield, right? Like that's been a mantra of theirs for years about how they need to get athletic in the outfield. With Seager, I'm with you. I don't see why you don't entertain keeping him around. I think at some point near the trade deadline, those two names are going to be brought up depending on A, what type of season they're having, and then B, what is the market looking for? If you've got teams out there and they're short a third baseman and they really need a third baseman to play solid defense, is a veteran, and Seager's stroking the ball, obviously you have to consider moving them for the pieces that are going to build towards your future. But if no one's looking for a third baseman, then yeah, you have to entertain keeping him around, especially at $15 million a year if he's having a solid season.
Yeah.
Because like you said, you need the veteran presence. Like that's been a secret recipe that is not so secret for every sports franchise out there. You have to have a blend of both young guys that are coming up and then the veterans who've been there that can handle the pressure, that can handle the rigors of the day-to-day job because they've done it for so many years.
Yeah.
Same thing with Haniger. Now, I would say with Haniger, my hesitation with him, why I'd be more willing to trade him if we took away the positional need, would be just the injury history. I know Seager's also had some injuries, but I feel like Haniger's had those lingering injuries. Just they don't go
pretty
away.
Major too,
the oblique thing, and you're like, man, he's wiped out a lot of games over the last 4 years with these lingering injuries. So he might be one that would be easier to trade if he's having a hell of a season. And it seems like everyone's kind of looking for that bat that's in the outfield that is as athletic as he is. So. Yeah, you have to entertain keeping Seager around or Hyder. There's no way you can jettison both. You do that and you don't bring in other veterans. I mean, you're going to have a really young, exciting team, but who knows how they're going to handle the ups and downs of a 162 league, season. I mean, people forget how long that baseball season is and how much that can just drain these guys.
Yeah, it's a grind.
And that's why you see these slumps, with guys like, hey, his first 20 games, he hit 400. In his second 20 games, he hit the Mendoza line. There's a reason for that.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you say that. I kind of thought you were going to go the other way. I thought you would have said that it was more likely that Haniger sticks around and Seager's done. But I think you touched on it in positional value. Haniger, even if he's 100% healthy this year, first of all, I think he would have more value in trade because his salary this year just $3 million, and then he's got an arbitration year, so a team knows that they could use that to negotiate an extension potentially, or that they would have another year of control at the very least. Whereas the thing about Seager, and for the last 3 years, I think we both and most fans had just assumed that 2021 was going to be it. The guy's coming off. All right, prior to 2017, just real quick here because we're cutting it close on time. He had always his wins against replacement, his WAR, had always been 3.5 or higher. He had a couple of peak seasons there of 5.2.
Yep.
2018, he dipped to 1.5, but that was his career low. And even that, where Fangraphs and these analytic guys consider each win above replacement to be worth about $10 million in salary. So even that 2018 year when he struggled mightily with his swing and dipped down to a 248 average, he, by that formula, was worth $15 million. Last year, or 2019, a 3-win player, and then last year in just 60 games, 1.5 again. It's. I would expect him to bounce back to that 2.5 to 3-win level this year, and to get him at $15 million in 2022 when Ty France can play third base, but he's not a natural there. I kind of like him better at second. I think it's a no-brainer because you don't have any young third baseman on the way.
Yeah, for the fabulous job they've done rebuilding the system, which you touched on earlier, so we don't have to get into the depths of it. It's positional need.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have that hot corner that's coming up to challenge Seager at this point.
But we got
that's
tons
where,
of outfielders. Yeah.
Oh my God! I mean, you look between our pitchers and our outfielders, and kind of these hybrid utility guys, because there's a few of those guys in there too. There's a ton of those guys up and down the system. I'm talking all the way from rookie ball, up to Double A. Even some of those guys are going to be in Triple A this year. So yeah, it's positional need. So Seager to me would be the natural, and you just explained it numbers wise. I mean, he's played at $15 million a year plus for 8 years.
Yeah.
So even his down year that you explained to everybody, he still made $15 million in value. I mean, his value was there. It was justified.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. One of those two guys should stick around. I just see Kyle Seager as that guy. I just think he's perfect in the locker room. He's perfect for the young guys. He's never going to complain about anything, even if he gets dropped down in the order. Obviously, it depends on how he performs this year. But if he looks as good, he's his health. He's in a better spot than he's ever been physically. I think it'll be one of the everyone's going to be watching the young guys. I think watching what those two guys do and how the team handles them is going to be one of the interesting storylines of the season as well.
I agree.
Erik Briggs, thank you again for joining us here on the Emerald City Sportscast. I appreciate it as always. And as always, we could use another hour. But we have a lot to keep our eye on.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
You've been doing a fabulous job, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. Say hi to the family for me, and we'll talk soon, all right?
Sounds good.
That's going to do it for today's episode, March 24th, 2021. The Mariners' opening day just a week from tomorrow, April 1st, against the San Francisco Giants. So we will get you ready for that. I'll break down the final roster next week as I join you again on the 31st. And we'll check back in with the Seahawks. Certain to be more moves between now and then. We'll look at the roster there as a whole and highlight some of their greatest needs still remaining in free agency a week from now. Again, thanks to Erik. Thanks to all the show supporters. Thank you to you for listening. Follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Emerald City Sportscast YouTube channel. And thanks again, everybody. I'm Dan Viens. We'll see you next week.